At one time, I thought that it would be terrible, but I found that old age is bearable, provided you have money. Cephalus has just come in from doing the ancestral sacrifices, and Socrates says, you know, Cephalus, you're an old man, and it's not that I'm so young, but you're certainly a good deal older than I am, a generation or so. Please, what's it like to get old? In other words, there's not much more that I would want, that Socrates might want to find out from Cephalus, because he's not a great thinker, but he does have some experience that Socrates doesn't, and maybe it'll be edifying for all these other young men. What's it like to get old? Do you like it? Has it been good or bad? What do you think of it? You know, a lot of people complain about it. What's your word on it? And Cephalus says, it's not so bad. You know, at one time, I thought that it would be terrible, but I found that old age is bearable, provided you have money. And Socrates says, well, why do you need money? He says, well, you know, here's a problem that I've had. When I was young, I was a real sport. I like sex and wine and money and power, and I like the sort of allurements of the external world. In other words, in his younger years, Cephalus was what might be called an erotic man. Not erotic in the limited sense of just sexually erotic, but he had lots of desire. He wanted things. And he was not terribly scrupulous in the way he'd gotten the things that he wanted, because good sensation or pleasure seemed to be the best thing that one could obtain, according to Cephalus. So he said, I did that all my younger years, and I had quite a good time. I lived a good life. I made some money, and, you know, I've been happy living here in Athens, particularly because I'm not a citizen. You know, he's a foreigner, what's called a metic. And Cephalus says, now that I've gotten older, you know, I start to worry about the gods and divine retribution. In other words, I did some things that perhaps I'm not proud of nowadays. And I look back on my life, and you know, I used to laugh at these stories about Hades and the bad stuff that happened to you after you die. But now, you know, I've started to contemplate my own death. And it turns out, at least implicitly, the contemplation of death is salutary. In other words, he starts to think about the fact that he's not going to be here forever. And the gods may have been like adding all this up and saying that you're going to pay after you die. So Cephalus says, you know, I've started to worry about that. So here's the good thing about money. It gives you a happy old age. You can take that money and pay back everybody that you've stolen from, right? And, you know, do a kind of deal there so that, look, I know that I got over on you, and I know that I swindled you, but here's some money back. What do you say we call it even?